We came into this episode wanting to talk about a lot of different topics that all were not technically related to each other. We wanted to talk about what's quote unquote wrong with Jalen Hurts, what has gone very, very right for Jordan Love. We wanted to hit on Jake Browning. We wanted to hit on the 49ers Eagles game. We wanted to hit on the Eagles Cowboys game. And we thought, okay, how could we tie all of these things together? And EJ, being the brilliant man that he is, came up with a general theme, which is the top 5 players that will determine the NFL playoffs, so to speak. And we mean that in the sense that they'll determine who gets into the playoffs and also potentially determine how far their teams go in the playoffs. Now, obviously, there's a bunch of other players that we could have put on this list when talking about, the 5 most impactful guys that can determine basically the entire rest of the season from a narrative perspective. And we encourage you guys to share your own selections for that in the comments down below. But in the meantime, these are going to be our 5. Before we get into it, EJ, how you doing?
I'm good. This is the Galaxy Brain episode of Bootleg Football. How can we take all these concepts that we want to talk about, tie it together in sort of 5 narrative stories of players who are in really high leverage spots? Some of them not only for their team, but the division, and then, hence for the playoffs. They're 5 of the most interesting players going right now. If we're going for the most interesting man in the world, these are 5 of the most interesting dudes in the NFL. For a bunch of different reasons, but it feels like it helps us, again, build that story as we go towards the playoffs of where the league is, what it's looking like, and some folks that are going to have to step up if their teams are going to have success.
I am going to throw you a little bit of curveball here because
Sure.
this is not on our outline. But I wanted to get your opinion on it because it's been a pretty hot topic over the last, not week, more like 2-3 weeks. Dak Prescott, MVP?
He's got a case. He absolutely has a case. If you look at the way he's played, I feel like we reference Ben Solak every week, but Ben put out a video. He said many people are saying that I am tempted to put out a Dak Prescott video of all the shots he's hit down the seam. And he had just one of them. And again, it looks like an impressive throw on the TV angle. On the end zone angle, it looks like an impossible throw.
It's
Like
insane.
cooking with gas. Like that is quarterbacking at the highest level, and making those plays in big games is a reason I would say he's in the conversation. That award is really fraught for many reasons. So you never really can tell exactly who's going to win it. Should he be in the conversation? Absolutely. I don't think the conversation is legitimate if he's not in there. I'll put it that way.
I also want to take a moment to express how wrong I was, because I firmly believe that when you're right about something, it doesn't mean shit unless you also admit when you're wrong about something. I think I was very, very wrong about Mike McCarthy calling this offense, right? And Kellen Moore, I think, has done a good job in LA for the most part, and there's a lot of metrics that can back that up. You look at red zone efficiency and all that kind of stuff. Really wish the receivers would catch the ball a lot more to translate to more wins, but I think Kellen overall has done a good job in LA. But Mike McCarthy has done a phenomenal job in Dallas calling the offense this year. It started out kind of wonky. First month of the season, they were, I believe, 30th in red zone efficiency. They were great between the 20s, but they would stall out constantly. And like something just wasn't quite right. Situationally, they weren't clicking. And back then I was like, like, this is kind of what I was afraid of, right? All flash,
Yep.
no substance. And then they got like 6 weeks into the year. And honestly, the turning point was right after the Niners game. And McCarthy did something that I don't think I've ever seen McCarthy do. And that's radically change his approach and modernize his approach, and incorporated not just motion, but motion at the snap. Now they're one of the teams that run it the most out of anybody, rather than being super static and super low on motion at the snap like they were early on. They're using CD creatively. And it's interesting because in the Dak MVP discussion, I do feel on some level this version of Dak has always been there. But now we're seeing what Dak would look like if he were in a very modern Shanahanian, Mike McDaniel type offense that uses a lot of motion and creates a lot of space and forces defenses into conflict. Like, we're now seeing Dak be maximized in the same way that other quarterbacks with similar, I don't want to say similar systems, but similar philosophies have been maximized before. Except Dak is better than Brock Purdy, and he's better than Jimmy Garoppolo, and he's better than all these other guys. And so now we're seeing like the A+ version of Dak that maybe has been there all along that we've never got to see before. So I didn't expect this, and I fully admit that I'm wrong about what Mike McCarthy is and is not capable of as a play caller. But I'm happy to be wrong because it's produced some really, really good football, and the Cowboys are legitimately super entertaining to watch because maybe for the first time in my lifetime, we're seeing them play up to their potential. Like, I truly don't think we've ever seen that before, and we're seeing it now. Like, they're a legit contender now.
I'm with you. McCarthy is one of the most, prior to this, stuck in his ways coaches in the NFL. And he went, he or somebody near him said, nope, we got to shake it up. And here's what we need to do. Shaking it up is not always a good thing. Sometimes you shake it up and it lands worse. They basically pulled all the right levers to do exactly what you're talking about with Dak and with the rest of the team, with the rest of the talent. Cowboys have never been a not talented roster. They always have talent on both sides of the roster, but it doesn't always get used in the best possible ways. I mean, you think back to the receiving core they had when they had the three-headed monster receiver, and we're like, man, they got the best receiving core in the NFL. They didn't play like it. I mean, not consistently. And now I would say, functionally, their wide receiver core is not even as good as that group, and they're playing better, like much, much better. And, they've had a great running game in the past. Their running game has not been that good this year, and they're still playing tremendous football, and they're more dangerous than they have been at junctures in the past. So all credit to McCarthy. I don't like giving that to that guy. He's hurt me plenty in my life.
As a Bears fan, yeah.
Yep, he's hurt me plenty in my life, and he wasted some very prime years of Aaron Rodgers by not doing that. It's one of the reasons he moved on from Green Bay, and one of the reasons LaFleur has had success is LaFleur came in and changed things and said, no, we're going to do a lot of the things that the Cowboys are now doing. So maybe if Mike McCarthy had been able to do that, he never would have left Green Bay, and we would have seen a different result. But he did, and LaFleur's been doing great in Green Bay, and McCarthy followed suit. And that is not something he's done in the past. And it's impressive, and the Cowboys are a better team for it.
Now, the Cowboys are playing against the Eagles this week. I think it's Sunday Night Football off the top of my head. It should be, at least. It's Cowboys Eagles. I bet it is. So they're playing against Philly this week, and they're coming off a pretty severe beating, which we will get into in detail shortly. But I just want to make you guys aware that if you also are a Dak believer, hell, even if you're not a Dak believer, if you think he can just get half of a yard against the Eagles, boy, I have a deal for you. Our season-long sponsor, Underdog. Anytime you sign up on Underdog with our promo code bootleg, or at the link in the description below, or at the QR code, which I'll throw on screen right now when I'm editing this episode, not only will you get a deposit match up to $100, but you're also going to get access to a Dak Prescott special for Sunday Night Football in this Eagles game, where as long as he gets more than a half of a yard passing, you get credit in your pick'ems. Now, I personally don't get access to that because I've played on the platform for a long time. It's just for new signups. But the rest of the entry that I put together around a hypothetical Dak half a yard number, I put Jake Ferguson at higher than half of a touchdown. I put CD at higher than 88.5 receiving. And I put Jalen Hurts at higher than 34.5 passing attempts, with Dallas Goedert higher than 33.5 receiving. So again, if you feel like playing on Underdog for pick'ems for either that game, that Cowboys-Eagles game, or any other game this week, or if you somehow don't even get to this episode before Sunday and you're listening to it on Monday, even if you put it in before Monday, there's a Tua special for Monday Night Football as well. So want to thank Underdog for supporting the show. Every time they support us, it helps us to do what we do here. And you guys supporting Underdog, then by proxy, supports us too. So with that, EJ, let's get to our actual first key player, I should say. It's going to be Jake Browning. I'll be honest, I didn't think I was going to talk about Jake Browning at all this season. Like, truly, this is the last quarterback that I thought we'd be talking about in December. But here we are. He's coming off a fantastic performance against Jacksonville, potentially reignited the Bengals' playoff hopes almost single-handedly in 1 week, while also making it a hell of a lot harder for the Jags to end up with the first seed. I'm not sure that they actually can now. I mean, mathematically they can, but realistically, kind of a tall order now. And that's all because of Jake Browning. He was brilliant on Monday. And there are still concerns to his game, I would say. But I came away after reviewing that game this morning, I came away a lot more confident in the Bengals not being dead than I thought I would.
Yeah. Tales of their death have been greatly exaggerated, to quote Mark Twain, and not in an unlikely manner. Again, so much of this team's fortunes tied to Joe Burrow and his health early in the season. And then in the middle of the season, he got healthy. Their fortunes changed, and everybody said, it's all right. We're good. We're fine. We're going to march. We're going to make the playoffs. We've got Joe back. Oh, no, we don't. He's gone again. So it's been a roller coaster ride for Bengals fans. Browning was an afterthought for even, I think, the most hardcore Bengals fan. And quite frankly, even the most hardcore Huskies fan. He was a UW guy. He played a lot of football here. This is a player that's had pedigree, a huge pedigree. He's one of the most recruited quarterbacks in the country in high school. He's one of the top players in the entire nation. Had a storied high school career, was incredibly productive at UW. But again, that transition between college and the pros was not particularly kind to him when we started poking holes in his game prior to him being selected. There were a lot of things that we worried about. We saw some of those early in his career sort of playing out, and then he kind of got quiet. He hit the backup role, sort of disappeared, changed teams, and I think a lot of people just sort of forgot about Browning or had their minds made up and said, this is who he is. Comes out last week, goes 32 of 37 for 354. And if you watch that game, his adjusted completion percentage was even higher than that because they had some drops. That's a damn near perfect game from a quarterback against a very good defense. This is not a terrible defense. Like, the Jags defense is full of playmakers. Yes, as a team, they could improve, but this is not a bunch of slouches. They've been playing very, very well. And he played better than that. He was patient. He took his shots. He looked composed. It didn't look too big for him. I love the quote that he gave after the game. Somebody said, were you surprised by how well you played? And he's like, no, like, I haven't played a lot in the pros, but I've won a lot of football games and I won another one. Like, yeah, no, I wasn't super surprised.
It was nothing. It was a Monday for him. Yeah.
That is such a badass baller quote without trying to be. Like, I love that. And this entire performance has changed the lens around Browning to, wait, I thought we were dead. Like, Bengals fans waking up and going, what, we didn't lose by like 20? Hang on. What? Wait a minute. What happened? Then they go back and they look. And if they go back and watch the game, they're going to see a very different Jake Browning than we've ever seen in the pros, period. Like, we saw him in college look like that a few times, but again, not even all that often in college did he look that good, that on target, that on top of it, that composed, making all the throws, making all the right choices, stepping up, running when he needed to. Like, everything was just on time, in rhythm, supported the team, drove it forward. Bengals fans, I think, are kind of like, wait, I don't know what to think. Like, I thought we were done. We're not done. He's good. He's really good. Like, it's such a fun conversation to be having. And now you get to ask the question, like, again, because the Bengals started off in that hole in the first month of the season, it's a really tough hill to climb, but it's not impossible anymore. And that is a holiday miracle.
When I look at Browning's game against the Jags versus Browning's game against the Steelers. There were a lot of similarities in the sense that it's quick game, quick game, quick game. Tons of bootlegs, screens, easy completions. I don't want to say they're treating him with kid gloves, but they are definitely prioritizing getting the ball out as fast as possible and kind of letting the playmakers do the heavy lifting, Jamar and T and all them. And it worked a lot better against Jacksonville than it did against Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh sacked him 4 times. They picked him off. They forced some mistakes from a guy who, maybe had some rust. Who knows? But I felt like, watching tape of both those games, the game plan against Jacksonville wasn't all that different. They just executed it a lot better. Browning, he was, he had a pretty high completion percentage against the Steelers, but I would say ball placement with that high completion percentage was better against Jacksonville in terms of setting guys up for yak opportunities, in terms of, the 4 big time throws they asked him to make the entire game. He threw it with good leverage, good placement. Everything was on time, layered the ball really well. There was a whole shot against cover 2 that he hit early. There was a far hash out against fire zone that he hit late. The 3rd and 10 in overtime was big. Obviously the go ball to Jamar was big. I didn't see any massive, oh my God, drive throws like you see from Mahomes or Allen or Herbert or anything like that. His arm is definitely not those guys, but it was still accurate. It was on time. He got it out quick. He was under pressure less because he got it out quick. I understand the average depth of target was 3.5 yards, which is not deep at all.
Nope.
But it worked. They shredded all that zone coverage by getting it out quick and just creating space and letting guys win after the catch. And then the one time they got man coverage and they needed to hit the big ball to Jamar, he hit the big ball to Jamar. So again, he steered the ship. I want people to slow down when they start saying, oh, Joe Burrow's a system quarterback. It wasn't the same system. Okay. They did not call the offense the same way at all. You're never going to catch Joe Burrow with an average depth of target of 3.5 yards. Okay. It's not the same. But what they did ask him to do, he did extremely well. And when you combine that with a defense that's certainly not playing to the level that we've seen in past years, but I also don't think is atrocious. They're solid. They're good enough. I think this team can be quote unquote good enough to maybe make a run at the 7 seed. Without Burrow, they're not going to go all the way, but I also don't think they're dead. And for Bengals fans, I think they'll take that at this point.
That's a present under the tree right now. They get to wake up and unwrap that thing and be like, wait, there's more meaningful football to be played this season? Cool. And you talked about that efficiency. And yes, the game plan was, I don't want to say scaled back, but it was definitely aimed at rhythm, staying ahead of the sticks, completions over yards in terms of air yards. And then it was those handful, 3 to 4 throws. You identified most of them where he looked just as comfortable throwing deep and driving the ball that he did throwing screens. And the team rallied in terms of defense, played well enough. Chase Brown, we got to see our first extended Chase Brown action. He came in and made a meaningful contribution. Held on to the ball, which was the knock against him in the draft. Really explosive, great pass catcher, super shifty, needs to not fumble all the time. Held on to the ball security was a thing. But again, people stepping up to say, look, we know that Browning is not Burrow. So we all need to do, as receivers, we need to go make our yak. As, offensive linemen, we need to hold our blocks for a second longer. Running backs, hey, I need to get everything I can on this to support Browning so that we can win as a team. And, we've seen this time and again with teams in the NFL where star goes down and everybody goes, well, we're going to have to step up. A less talented player replaces them, but the team plays, I don't say better, but just as well in this case as a whole. And that was not something anybody expected with Burrow out of lineup. So very pleasant surprise for Cincinnati fans, maybe a less pleasant surprise for other AFC North teams that were ready to write the Bengals off. Going to be a fight to the finish.
Our second key player here over in the Bay Area, Deebo Samuel. There's a lot of key players for the 49ers that are going to determine how far they can go. Obviously, Trent Williams, like if we're going to define like MVP for this team, it's probably Trent, honestly, because this offense looks entirely different when Trent's not in there. But Trent is really more about like establishing floor, in my opinion. In terms of establishing ceiling for this team, you know, who is a playmaker that is so dynamic that it can turn a playoff team into a championship team, all else being equal? It's Deebo Samuel. Like he will miss games, he will get banged up, especially with his play style. Like he's going to get bumps and bruises. But when he's out there, and feel free to disagree with me on this, it feels like the team feeds off of his energy. It feeds off his physicality. The Niners are really only like true bullies when Deebo's out there, because it feels like everybody sees him just beat the absolute shit out of people and they say, I want to go match that. Like this team just looks different when Deebo's there. The offense is different when Deebo's there. And again, even if Trent is MVP because he establishes that floor, when Deebo's on the field, I really do feel like they could win a Super Bowl. When he's not, I feel like they're going to fall short. Like he is that important.
We said this a couple of weeks ago. I particularly remember saying, we were talking about the 49ers. We said they're always a good team and they're always a threat to win, but they just don't feel as dangerous when just a couple pieces are missing. And the pieces we talked about were Trent Williams and Deebo. And I feel like Deebo is the sheriff on this team. Like he is the dude that walks into town, stands in the middle of the street and goes, not today. Like, no way. And I just want people to realize like how absurd he is as a player. That's such a weird thing to say for a role of a guy that plays his role, which is a little bit of running back, a lot of wide receiver, just offensive playmaker. Like those guys aren't typically like tone setters. You can talk about Tyreek and certainly the element of dynamism and explosiveness that he brings to the Dolphins offense, but I wouldn't necessarily say he's the tone setter. He might be the plate setter, but he's not the tone setter. And Deebo is both, and it's so weird. So versus Dallas earlier this season, 5 rushes for 30 yards, 6 a carry, 3 catches for 55 yards, 18.3 yards per reception. For total, that's 8 touches, 85 yards, 10.6 yards per touch. Basically a first down every time he touches it. That's crazy valuable in any player, in any role. Like you give it to them, you get a first down every time they touch it once. That's silly enough. We'll just say that. Versus Philadelphia, and we'll talk about that beat down in a second. This might be one of the most ridiculous NFL stat lines ever, right up there with the Randy Moss stat line. And like, so 3 rushes for 22 yards, 1 touchdown, 7.3 yards per carry. That part is not at all really silly. Receiving 4 for 116 yards, 2 touchdowns, 29 yards per reception. That's getting up there, but there have been plenty of, Tyreek's had days like that where he touched the ball 4 times and made a huge difference. I get it. The part about that that's just absurd, that puts the Deebo stat line like above the line, in my opinion, is out of that 116 yards, there was 1.5 air yards.
Like total? How is that even possible?
And you're like, what? How does that? How did he? But all right. So in total against Philly, 7 touches, 138 yards, 3 touchdowns, 19.7 yards per touch, double a first down every time he touched the ball in that game. After already averaging a first down against Dallas, against Philly, he decided that wasn't good enough. I need 2 first downs every time I touch the ball. What? I mean, this is not normal stuff. So just public service announcement during this draft cycle. when you have the urge and you go, he's like, and you think about saying the word Deebo, just don't do that. Pick another guy, compare him to somebody else. He's not like Deebo. Nobody's like Deebo. Deebo is Deebo. He is extremely tough, super physical. He's a tone setter. He takes absolutely no shit. Like he walked into Philly. This is on the road. Like, no, we're winning today. Like absolutely 100% we're winning today. Don't want to hear anything else. I'm going to do what I need to do to make that happen. Puts up legitimately one of the craziest stat lines in NFL history, in my opinion.
I also, while we're on the topic of Deebo, I want to take an opportunity to talk about both the 49ers Eagles game and the 49ers Cowboys games kind of together in totality, because there was a skid in the middle of the year where the 49ers got a little bit banged up. Obviously, they were missing Trent. Deebo got banged up a little bit. CMC had to leave the game early. And they lost, I think it was 3 straight, if I recall correctly. And they didn't look like themselves because, as we've said time and time again, the top layer, the top 22 for the 49ers is amazing. The depth, not so much, right? And when you're missing the guy who establishes your floor and the guy who establishes your ceiling, yeah, you're going to lose to Minnesota. You're going to lose to Cleveland. Like, no disrespect to those teams, but against a fully healthy 49er squad, they probably would not have. Well, maybe Cleveland would have because their defense was incredible at that point. But like, it's a lot tougher matchup when the 49ers are at full strength, right? And we've seen the 49ers at full strength take on the 2 other, big bad bullies of the NFC and completely demolish them, shoved them in a locker over and over again. But what I want to focus on most is how exactly they did that, and really how exactly they used Deebo to do that, right? To kind of establish themselves as the alpha of the NFC, like the absolute pinnacle of the NFC when they're healthy. The common theme between those 2 games was not just their usage of Deebo, but how they forced both Philly and Dallas into playing the kinds of coverages that Deebo can absolutely eat you alive in, right? It's a lot of, and we've talked about this a few times before, but for those that have not heard those previous episodes, it's a lot of condensed formations. It's a lot of 21 personnel and 12 personnel, big bodies. We're going to show the run. We're going to force you into cover 3. When we spread out, you can play a whole bunch of stuff into that, right? You're going to get more into your quarter stuff. You're going to get more into cover 1. You're going to get more into cover 2 if we spread out. If we're condensed and we're playing bunches, or we're playing like really close stacks, and we have everybody in the core, you're probably going to play cover 3 because you don't want to get caught in traffic by playing man coverage into it. You really don't want to get caught in a too high safety structure against that unless you have an absolutely badass defensive line that can just spill everything outside, which against the 49ers run game, very few teams can even do that anyway. Like even the Eagles were forced into playing cover 3 because they felt like they needed that extra guy down in the box. And when you're looking at coverage percentages of both the Cowboys and the Eagles against this 49ers offense that wants you to be in cover 3 so that they can use Deebo in all these catch and run situations, collectively, they forced Dallas and Philly into playing cover 3 55% of the time, which is an absolutely crazy number. Like, to put it into context, the number 1 team in terms of running cover 3 this year, surprise, surprise, Gus Bradley's Colts. Like, 10 years in a row, Gus Bradley's been at the top of the league in terms of running cover 3. Even he's at 48%. So these 2 teams were forced into playing a ridiculous amount of cover 3 just based on formation, just based on personnel grouping. And when you're doing that, all of a sudden it puts a lot of stress on your hook zone defenders to not just play the run and more specifically react to the run fake, but then also have to deal with the threat of a perimeter screen to deal with to Deebo to deal with the threat of him just running a basic and catching it over the middle, and then you got to make a tackle, and he's going to absolutely run through your face. The threat of Deebo doing all the Deebo things, even him getting a carry on like a jet sweep, or all of a sudden you motion him into the backfield or running toss the other way. There's so many different ways that you can attack that specific coverage with a weapon like him. And that's the whole point of their offense, is to get you into that look so that they can use Deebo the way they use Deebo and just completely thrash you with both versatility and physicality. And I understand the Brock Purdy MVP thing, because he wins like an absurd percentage of his games and he's super efficient, and I get it. But it is so much easier for Brock Purdy to be Brock Purdy when he can throw a tunnel screen and have Deebo house it, right? Like it's very similar almost to like the Jake Browning thing we just talked about in Cincy, where it's like, hey, you don't got to do anything crazy. Distribute the ball, get it to your playmakers, let your playmakers win the game. Well, guess what? Deebo's that guy. Deebo's the ultimate version of that guy, where he can get 100-something yards on an average air yard of like 1.5. Like it's absolutely insane that every single week we know what the 49ers are going to do. We know what coverage they're going to force you into playing. And yet it still happens. And they know that and they know that they can still get away with it because they're the 49ers, and that's Deebo Samuel. Fuck you. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. See you next season.
And Purdy needs his credit for playing that role extremely well, and he has this year. He has been accurate. He has been on time. Actually, kind of like the comparison to Browning. I think Purdy is probably a better quarterback at this point than Browning, but plays very similarly. When you give him those deep shots, when you load it up and say, no more Deebo, it's Ayuk time. It's Kittle down the seam time. And he hits those with regularity. And that's what makes them deadly, is damned if you do and damned if you don't. If you can manage to stop the way they want to go with CMC and Deebo, they're going to go the other way and hurt you in big chunks that way. So it's pick your poison. Purdy allows them to play that way, as do Deebo and Ayuk and Kittle. We've talked about all that before. So they're a very tough team to crack when all those pieces are in place.
On the other side of that matchup, we got the Philadelphia Eagles. I'm not necessarily hitting the panic button yet, but my hand is getting closer. And it's for a bunch of different reasons. We've talked ad nauseum about their inability to cover this year, and we saw that on full display against the 49ers, right? Can't cover anything, especially over the middle. Like they are riding the struggle bus there. And their defense is still wholly reliant on their defensive line putting in a Herculean effort and taking over the game, especially late. And we've seen that happen several times this year too, against Washington, against New England. Like, their defensive line has bailed them out quite a bit. But now they got another problem. And, well, I shouldn't say problem. They have another concern.
I was going to say, you might want to scrub that one back. We'll see about that.
And I'm trying to differentiate myself from David Carr here, because I understand what
you've
David
been sacked a lot less.
Yes, I have had a lot less physical trauma on my body than David Carr, but I do understand, though, what he was trying to convey, which is that Jalen has had actual issues in terms of throwing from the pocket this year. Like, I understand what he was trying to say. He just said it in the worst way possible, by even bringing up, he should be benched for Marcus Mariota because Marcus Mariota is going to be better in the drop back pass game, right? Like, no, he's not. Okay. He's
not.
And I think we can talk realistically about the struggles of Jalen Hurts this year. And we could talk maybe about, okay, how much of it is because of the knee or whatever. I think we can acknowledge those struggles without being so hyperbolic that we need to even bring up Marcus Mariota, right? Like, We're all adults here. We
One
don't
would
have to
hope.
do that. One
Yeah.
would hope. And I'm trying. I don't want to say I'm trying to play both sides here because I don't want to be too alarmist about it. But at the same time, like the tape is the tape. Like there are legitimate concerns that he hasn't had in probably 2 full seasons that all of a sudden have cropped up again in terms of drop depth. He'll be dropping too deep and giving his tackles just terrible pass protection angles. And maybe it's because he feels like he wants to be so deep so that he has easier escape lanes out the side door, just like Patrick Mahomes when he went through that phase roughly in the same part of his career too, before he kind of reined it in and was like, okay, I'm going to sit here at my 7-8 yard depth. Like Hurts is still dropping too deep and making it really hard on Lane and really hard on Mailata to just do their jobs. And I also see, I guess you call it a priority from the defensive lines that are playing against the Eagles now, where they take really wide rush angles because they're planning on him dropping deep, or they just go straight up power on the edge to try to constrict it as quickly as possible to force him to step up because he doesn't seem to like stepping up right now. Like he doesn't seem to really want to kind of step into the trash and let the pocket develop around him. Um, and you can literally see his eyes drop when he is forced to do that. His eyes will drop into the pressure rather than staying down the field, and it's not panic, but it does seem to be almost like a Pavlovian response where, okay, if I'm stepping up, in his head, he's thinking that means there must be an escape route out the front. And you're literally seeing defensive tackles just waiting for him to take that bait. And a lot of the times when Jalen gets in trouble, it's because defensive lines know that even if the edge rushers aren't going to get there, they can force Jalen into the interior rush because he's not like when he steps up, he's not going to stop. He's going to go all the way and he's going to try to look for a front door rather than looking down the field and trying to throw from that messy pocket. And it's so frustrating because he didn't do that last year. Like he was legitimately good from the pocket. He wasn't dropping his eyes against interior pressure. He wasn't constantly looking for an escape route, whether it's to the side or out the front. And this year, for whatever reason, his pocket skills have grossly diminished. And when you combine that with a fairly static offense that doesn't use a lot of motion, that demands that its receivers go out there and just win, when they run up against a defense like the 49ers that actually covered them up pretty well, either in man or in quarters, which essentially plays out like man anyway, it was kind of a recipe for disaster. Nobody was getting open, and Jalen wasn't patient enough to throw guys open from the pocket. And it led to them getting absolutely beat down. So again, I understand what Carr is trying to say because the tape isn't good in terms of, hey, can you win from the pocket in the drop back pass game? Like right now, he's not. But also at the same time, like neither would Marcus Mariota. So
No.
that's probably not the solution he thinks it is.
Oh, Falcons fans feeling a little bit of PTSD here, like, no, 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 Carr, no, you don't know what you're talking about, and it's not that he doesn't know what he was talking about. It's that he took an example of trying to add nuance to a discussion and just did it as poorly as possible. Like he did it the wrong way, and this is why playing quarterback in the NFL is so freaking hard because it is constantly evolving. If you get to a place where you are the alpha and you are leading as a passing quarterback and you are dictating to defenses, it will not stay that way. Defenses will adapt and adjust. You will have, injuries or changes on your side that will knock you off that pedestal. And you constantly, as a starting quarterback, have to find a way to fight back to that level of prominence, whether it's through injury, through problems, through slumps. And right now, the defense is dictating to Jalen Hurts more than he was dictating to them earlier in the season. They've got the book on him, and the book on him is to make a pocket that looks about like this, right? If
Yeah.
this is the offensive and defensive line, they want to make a pocket that looks like a pair of parentheses. And they do that in a bunch of different ways, but they want to make a sort of long, narrow pocket to make him step up. Because if he steps up, he drops his eyes. That means they don't have to hold their coverage for just as long because he's not looking for a receiver at that moment. And then when he gets to that place where a lot of quarterbacks step up and then make a play, it's going to take an extra beat. And if it takes an extra beat, gives chances for the rushers to get there. Downfield coverage doesn't have to hold up for that one moment where he's stepping up and his eyes have dropped down. And suddenly the whole thing kind of breaks down. And what you see on tape is you're thinking, man, throw it, throw it, throw it. And then when you look at the end zone angle, it was covered up. And again, the rush kind of looks the same when the defense gets it the way they want it to every time. They're like, and he's dropping deep. That's Jalen's dropping deep to try and be able to squirt out the backside of that. And it just, again, because of the shape of that rush, it's deeper and deeper every time. And that makes him less effective. Now you're 12 yards away from the line of scrimmage and your tackle angles are screwed up and he just wants that out to the side. And they're like, we're going to overplay that. And we're going to fill the holes to make sure, because again, maybe it's the knee, because before that, he was super dangerous to step up. You're going to, cause a thin spot. He's going to slip through that crack and then he's going to go for 10 or 15 yards and reset with a new set of downs. They're doing it just enough to extend that to say, if you go out and around, if you want to boot this out, you're going to be 15 yards away from the line of scrimmage. And we'll take that. We will take you running around 15 yards behind the line of scrimmage. And I'm glad you brought up Mahomes, because he went through that and defenses did the same thing. They were like, the last thing we can do is let Pat out of the pocket, because when you let Pat out of the pocket, terrible things happen. Late,
especially to his right? Because
right.
that's
It's
when
just
he's he's going to do the crazy throwback left shit that,
and you're just
kills
like,
you.
and so defenses sold out against Patrick Mahomes to not let him get out to the edges. They would do anything. And like you said, Pat had to then readjust. This is a chess match. This is a, measure and countermeasure, measure and countermeasure. And Jalen's in a place where he's going to have to learn to play within the envelope that's being given to him right now, which doesn't seem, like you said, like he wants to step up and throw from the pocket. He's not quite as effective scrambling. Maybe it's the knee. We'll see. But until he can solve this particular defensive structure that teams are using against him very well now. And look, you do have to have heavy corners to make this work. Because look, if AJ Brown gets free in 2 seconds, he's still chucking it up to him. And he's very good throwing the deep ball down the field. So you got to be able to hold up physically against those wide receivers for a couple of seconds. But if you do, now you're starting to see success. People see that as a plan. It's a copycat league. Everybody's got the tape. And if you've got a couple of heavy corners and a rush that is disciplined enough to create a particular shape pocket around Jalen Hurts, you can have some success right now. Still tough to beat the Eagles. They're still winning a lot of football games, which is why I don't like the way Carr framed his argument. Like, even with these lackings that we see on tape, the Eagles are still winning a lot of football games with Jalen Hurts at quarterback. But now there's an answer. Earlier in the season, it's like, even though the Eagles aren't playing their best football, there's no answer. Because if you try this, they're beating you this way. If you try the other thing, they're beating you another way. There's just no answer. Now it feels like, and as we get towards the playoffs and things tighten up, it feels like there might be an answer.
The only team that now I'm not convinced there is an answer against is the 49ers, because they're healthy again. Now I'm like, oh God, what do you do? I guess you don't want to hope that people get injured, but it's like, I don't know if you have a real shot if they have all their dudes, whereas at least against Philly, there's like a game plan that you can kind of come up with. Against the 49ers, I don't know. I guess I'll just die.
I guess I'll just die.
Oh. All right. Fourth key player here, keeping it in the NFC in terms of a key player that could shape the face of the NFC playoffs. Welcome to the show, Jordan Love. I got to say, I didn't expect this.
Nope.
Going off the first half of the season, I mean, shit, we put the Packers, a month ago now at this point, when they were sitting at the eighth or ninth overall pick. We were putting them in the episode of like, how to rebuild the bottom barrel teams of the league, because that's what it looked like they were in need of was a rebuild. The Jordan Love thing wasn't working. You know, they had some young offensive pieces that we're a big fan of, but like it felt like there needed to be not even a rebuild, more of a reload, a mini reset, like whatever word you want to use. It felt like they were in need of that. And now, a month later, Jordan Love just decided to be good, decided to be Aaron Rodgers 2.0, and the Packers are making a playoff run, and not only making a playoff run, but looking pretty darn dangerous as a playoff contender. And a lot of that is because Jordan Love doesn't look like the Jordan Love we're used to. Like, he looks like a completely different quarterback now, just over the course of the last month.
And it is solely because of him. That is the reason. If there was the level of quarterback competence or incompetence, whatever you want to call it, from the first 6, 7, maybe even 8 games of the season, the Packers weren't going to go anywhere. They were going to know what they didn't have in Jordan Love at that point, but until he was able to turn the corner, or if he was able to turn the corner, the Packers had no answers. He turned the corner. Like, it's time now. He's done it consistently for several weeks. It is a completely different looking quarterback. Whatever happened. Game slowed down for him. LaFleur came up with a different translation. He got comfortable with his young receivers, all of the above. He is a very different player right now, and he is a difficult quarterback to defend. He is a problem now because of the looks he's getting, the comfort he has within the offense, the time he's taking. And the one that really tripped it over for me, which was the sort of, oh shit, it happened again level of worry, was the play in the last game where he stepped up into the pocket, almost hopped up, I would say somewhat awkwardly, instantly reset his feet with his eyes downfield and hit a guy for a touchdown.
Yeah.
And it was the way that he did it. There was
Because I
no
know
panic.
it looked like 12, man. It looked like 12. And I was like, God
know.
damn it. Again.
And he just hopped forward, kind of on an awkward angle, landed with his feet in the right place to be looking at the receiver. There's no like double reset, and hopped up into what was a muddy pocket. So exactly the skill we were just talking about with Jalen Hurts. Like, he did that into what was a gross pocket, a collapsing pocket, made it look easy, like made it look effortless. And at that point I went, shit, it happened again. Like, they got another good one. And it's not because of that one play. That one play just signified like what we've been seeing for the last 3.5 weeks is real. Like, it is a functional shift. He has hit his stride. He is comfortable. He's making the players around him, who are also very young, better. That wide receiver core has not made as much progress as he has in the same period of time, but you'd be hard pressed not to know that, because he's covering it up. And a good quarterback playing at this level with this level of precision and calm will cover up a lot of warts on a football team.
One of the big factors, and I mean, going back to his time at Utah State, like I cited at the time the reason why I was hesitant about Love as a prospect, or at least as a first round prospect, was inaccuracy down the field. Like, he was very inaccurate deep down the field at Utah State. And then we waited a few years to see him get some real NFL action. And in the first 8 weeks of this season, again, there's 32 starting quarterbacks in the NFL. He was ranked 33rd in terms of adjusted completion percentage on targets of 20 plus yards down the field. Adjusted completion percentage, by the way, takes out drops and takes out throwaways. So it's just, did you hit the guy or not, right? On an actual throw down the field. He was at 24.4% in weeks 1 through 8. Just atrocious, right? And then, seemingly out of nowhere, week 9 onward, so the last 5 games, so it's 7 games of suck and then 5 games of brilliance. He's tied with Trevor Lawrence as a top 5 quarterback in the league in terms of adjusted completion percentage of 20 plus yards, 57.7%. Like that's an elite number. That is deadly accurate down the
Yep.
field. And you can see in all the other metrics in the Packers offense that have turned around in terms of explosiveness, in terms of efficiency, like EPA, like whatever you want to throw out there, like every metric is better. And a big reason for that is because they actually finally have some explosiveness down the field. Not that they didn't have the speed before, but now they have the ability to hit that speed. And it's completely opened up everything else. Not to mention Matt LaFleur has called, the last 5-ish games brilliantly. And he's been in his bag as a play caller and play designer. Like this is a real offense now. It's an actual real offense. And that terrifies me because we are still technically only, we're not even 16 full starts into Jordan Love's career now. So
Nope.
even though he's not a rookie, like this is, again, rookie sample size. And he's looking like this. I'm a little bit scared to know what he's going to look like by the end of next season. Because if he's just now getting it, like what's 2024 going to look like when they're another draft deep with weapons or protection or whatever to build around him? Like they might have something here, man. And it's terrifying.
It's not might anymore. I'm past might with a month worth of, again, solid, like linked performances between him and LaFleur. And it's very important to point out that relationship. There were people like a month ago that were calling for LaFleur's head, which to me was absolute insanity. Like after everything he's done in his, his start of his tenure in Green Bay was historic in terms of the number of wins in a very like a storied franchise. He was the best for starting off. And people were like, 6 games, get him out of here. It's terrible. And I was like, you have no idea what you're talking about. And he has stayed with it and found ways to change whatever it is he's doing to call it for Jordan Love. So Jordan Love doesn't have to do everything on every play. And Dan Orlovsky pointed this out brilliantly on NFL Live. I think it was yesterday, that it's a really nice mix of here's a play where you only need to make one decision. You need to make it right still, but you only need to make one decision. Like you read this guy, make this play, right? And then a little bit now that that comfort is there and that demonstrated ability is there. Okay, on this one, you've got the full menu. Like you can change the play at the line. You can go to a play that you really like. You can look for a matchup that you really think you're going to get based on pre-snap alignment. Like that's handing the game plan to your quarterback and saying, you decide. I trust you enough that I've taken you out of simple reads, reduced splits, half field reads, short game that we talked about for some quarterbacks in the beginning of this episode, but not doing that all the time, right? Keeping we talk about play calling as a rhythm thing, almost as like a mystical art. It's not play designing. It's when do you pull the lever, how much and how hard. And LaFleur has managed that as well as anybody in the league over the last month, McCarthy included. And we talked about McCarthy at the top of this, but he has found that rhythm. He and Jordan Love have found that balance to where it's not too much for, again, I'll say the rookie. He's not a rookie. He's a third-year player, but like the guy that only has less than 16 starts, like how much are you comfortable with? They've found that comfort level, right? And the kinks are worked out. We say this all the time. They've gelled, right, as a pairing. And again, 4.5, 5 straight starts here looking like this. I don't see reversion happening anytime soon. This looks like a very happy marriage going forward. And yes, as a Bears fan, that is devastating. But for Packers fans and fans of, good NFL football, he looks so good right now. He's a lot of fun to watch.
Right now, they're sitting at a 7 seed at 6-6. They're playing against the Giants this week. So again, favorable matchup to say the least. They got the Bucks, which is kind of sneaky tough, not going to lie. And then let's see, what do they have after that? Looking at the schedule, they got the Panthers. Okay, cooking with gas now. Then they got the Vikings. That's a big one. Maybe not in terms of determining playoff spot. They might both have playoff spots locked up by then, just considering the NFC. But it might go a long way to determining seeding. And then they finish off with a showdown with the Chicago Bears. So Bears have potential to play spoiler there, depending on how close the NFC is. But I would say overall, looking at that stretch, the Packers have complete control of their own destiny in terms of making it in. And once they're in, again, with how well they're playing, I'm not ready to put a cap on them. I don't think that they're ready quite yet to beat the 49ers or honestly, really just the 49ers. Everybody else is probably fair game. Like I don't hate the matchup in terms of Green Bay versus everybody who's not San Francisco. And if you told me I was going to say that a month ago, I would have laughed in your face. But here we are.
It's tremendous change. I still don't love the matchup against Philadelphia, regardless of how Jalen's playing. Philly is a completely loaded roster, and I think Green Bay would have to play their very best game. Could they beat them? Sure. I'm with you. Less so if the 49ers are healthy, but I'm not ready to say that they're an even match for Philly right now. But everybody else, especially like you said, just let's not get ahead of ourselves. The rest of their schedule, if they knock off the Vikings and then pick up another division win against the Bears, which seems pretty likely, the rest of those games look pretty darn winnable. And, you take 2 basically versus the Vikings. If you win that one, it's a favorable setup for them with as well as they're playing. And again, you get hot in the playoffs. It only takes 1 game, single elimination tournament, beat anybody on a given Sunday. They could make some noise here.
Now, our final key player in terms of determining our playoff slate. I will say ahead of time, EJ, I have a disagreement with you on this one.
Okay.
Same team, but I have a different player.
Fair enough. I figured you might.
You know me, I have a soft spot for him. But we're going to talk Colts here. They're barely hanging on. They're at 7-5. Houston's breathing down their neck, also at 7-5. There's honestly a whole host of AFC teams that are right there. But Indy does have technically control of their own destiny right now if they can hang on for dear life and not lose to Houston in the last week. Like that Houston game is massive in week 18, especially with both these teams fighting for playoff spots. In terms of the key, though, the key player that will not just carry Indy to the playoffs, but potentially carry them through the playoffs is Michael Pittman. That was your selection for this category. Again, I have a different one, and I'll let you say your piece
on the
first.
plank there. Appreciate that. Now, lots of talk over the last month about Gardner Minshew's efforts, and he's been fine. But where are all those throws going? Like Pittman is the guy, and the reason I wanted to put him on this list is I think we've heard the least about him in the entire NFL of guys with production at his level. And I'll just throw this in early. Shane Steichen gotta be in the conversation for Coach of the Year. His hotshot rookie quarterback goes down a month in. He's got Gardner Minshew and a bunch of other talent that is good, but again, rookie head coach, like most people, a lot like the Bengals fans, probably just wrote off the Colts and said, next year, we'll see what happens. Steichen hasn't allowed that to happen. Back to Pittman. He's averaged 12.4 targets per week over the last 5 weeks. He's topped 100 yards receiving in each of the past 2 weeks. He has 36 more catches, 300 more yards, and twice as many TDs as any other receiver on the Colts, whether they're a receiver, a tight end, because famously they've had a lot of production from their tight ends in the past few years. Not so. Like Michael Pittman is the guy on this offense that is catching all those balls and is being hyper productive to make all those throws from Minshew count for something. And He has been workmanlike, tough, blocks in the run game, good size, all routes, down the field, cross the middle, short stuff. Like, they use him in every way possible, and he has done nothing to not pay off their confidence of, again, him being a top draft pick. That's what they drafted him to do, and he is fulfilling that role right now. Again, on a team that's been pretty quiet nationally. There's been a lot of hype, even in their own division, about the Texans and the surge that they're on. And yes, they have to beat them head to head. But honestly, if Pittman went out of the lineup tomorrow, like, I think that would effectively end the Colts' chances.
Probably. Like I do agree with you on that, because he is so far ahead of everybody else on Gardner Minshew's priority list. And like
Uh,
and Minshew, he's so Ryan Fitzpatrick. It's hilarious to me. Or like Rex Grossman, or any one of those types of quarterbacks where, their general plan is, fuck it, my number one receiver's down there somewhere.
yep.
For Fitzpatrick, there was a rotation, or a rotating cast of number ones, whether it was Mike Evans or D Hop or anything like that. And I would even like throw Nick Foles in that category, like Alshon Jeffrey, where it's like, coverage look is not favorable, but let's just try it. Minshew is that mold of journeyman backup quarterback that once he gets on the field, he's going to take chances. And Michael Pittman is the guy that he takes chances with. It's why he is the heart and soul of that offense right now. And I mean Pittman, not Minshew. However, the reason why I slightly disagree in terms of who the key player is for the Colts is because eventually they're going to run into a team that on every single third down, they're going to call one double, and the double is going to be Pittman, and they're
Yep.
going to force Gardner to go somewhere else with a true one-on-one everywhere else. They're going to force him to take chances on the rest of his receiving core. And he hasn't really done that until last week against the Titans, where he finally, mercifully, realized that Alec Pierce exists.
Yep.
And Pierce got his first touchdown of the year, was 13 weeks into the season, finally got his first score, had a 100-yard game, got featured deep down the field. He became that big play threat that, going back to the summer, like we had talked about it extensively, of like, here's this guy who gets open constantly, and he's as big and as fast as DK Metcalf, and you put him out there at X, and he's going to go whoop up on smaller corners and anybody that doesn't run 4-3.
Yep.
And I really do believe that if Anthony Richardson stayed healthy the entire year, Richardson seemed to develop trust with Pierce very early on and was taking chances with him. Gardner Minshew did not. He locked in on Pittman and said, that's my guy. I'm throwing it to Pittman at every possible opportunity. At long last, Minshew finally gave Pierce a few more looks, and Pierce paid it off. So for me, the key player is Alec Pierce, because when Pittman inevitably gets doubled in January or later in December, like you better believe D'Amico Ryans last game of the season, playoffs on the line, like who do you think he's doubling on every single third down? It's going to be Pittman. So it's going to be on Pierce to get the Colts into the playoffs, and it's going to be on Gardner to continue that trust with Pierce and take shots to him, give him chances, let him break the game the way that he is physically capable of breaking the game. They didn't do that until last week, but they're going to have to do it a lot more over the next month, or like they very easily could lose that playoff spot if they continue to be overly reliant on one receiver, especially with Jonathan Taylor injured right now. Like they have to diversify themselves. They don't have an option to. Luckily, Alec Pierce is good enough that if they lean into that and if they diversify, they have a shot to do some real damage here.
It was great to see Pierce get his shot, because you and I were both big Pierce defenders as the type of wide receiver we really saw him to be. And we finally thought, hey, in Indianapolis, he is properly cast, right? He is not, they're not trying to make him a number one. They're trying to make him a very dangerous vertical number two. And man, is he straight out of central casting for that. Like that is his role. And he's awesome. And Josh Downs, we got to talk about him. He was one of our offensive gems. He is the second leading receiver on this team, and Minshew has found him a little bit. But yeah, the frustrating part about Pierce is I saw a stat, it was like a month ago, that he led the league in yards run per target.
Oh,
Like
because everything's like 35 yards down the field.
he'd run like 9 miles of routes on the field and he had like 14 receptions or something. It was
Oh
ridiculous.
god.
So, he was always going deep, and that's it. That's all they were using him for, is he would run deep and they wouldn't throw it to him. So it was really cool to see that get paid off. I hope that they continue to do that, make them a much more dangerous team. Like you said, with Taylor currently injured, they're going to have to. Downs has been a very nice compliment. They did draft him to be wide receiver 3 and dangerous at that. Good to see him there as well. But yeah, you're not going to be able to rely purely on Pittman, maybe to get you in, but that's going to be the end of it after that. Whoever they meet in the playoffs is going to lock him down as hard as they can and go make somebody else beat us. And guys like Pierce and Downs are going to have to pick up the slack, but got to give Pittman the nod for just like volume, toughness. He's taken some massive shots. AR threw him some
He's
hospital
got to
balls.
live in the cold tub, man, like
Yeah.
every game.
So big shout out to Michael Pittman Jr. He's been driving this team. It's cool to see some of the other weapons step up, but we hope that's a somewhat comprehensive look at where the league's going through the focused lens of 5 stories of 5 players who are very important on their teams right now as to whether or not they make the playoffs, and if they make the playoffs, how far they go. Felt like a fun way to sort of summarize the week and just a snapshot of where we're at right now.
Before we get out of here, there's really no good transition into this. I'm sorry to our friends over at Homage, but I do want to thank Homage for being a loyal partner to this show. They are the source where you can get all of your bootleg gear. Recently launched over on Homage. It's kind of amazing that after all this time, we finally have that line live, because it's been a dream of ours for a couple years now, but it is now live. So if you're interested in any and all bootleg merch, please feel free to head to that link in the description. We get a cut of every single purchase. And we want to thank Homage again for making that possible. Also want to thank Underdog for helping to make this entire season possible with their support. Our main paycheck, other than directly from you guys, comes directly from Underdog, and they've helped to kind of carry us through not just this year but next year too. So if you guys are interested in playing Underdog this Sunday or at any other weekend for the rest of the season, or maybe you want to do playoff best ball, or maybe you're looking forward to draft season where you can do rookie best ball starting in like February. Like it starts early, right?
Early.
Head on over to Underdog, use promo code bootleg. They'll match your deposit up to $100, and you get access to a free special this Sunday. With that, one more round of thank yous for our executive producers over on Patreon as well. Marat, Consti, Andrew, Liam, Connor, and Mike L. You guys are amazing once again. And with that, EJ, I think I'm all out of thank yous. You got anything else?
I just gonna say about Homage, if you want great holiday gear, because I'm not really the holiday sweater type, but I love me a good holiday t-shirt. So they hooked me up with the Christmas store, you'll shoot your eye out shirt, which is going to be my holiday go-to through the whole season. I can already tell it's super comfortable, but lots of fun. One of my favorite holiday movies. So they've got tons of other examples. Head over, check them out. And again, use the link in the description. Anything you buy through that helps support the show directly. Love working with them. They're a tremendous partner.
With that, thank you all for listening and watching once again. However you may consume this show, we'll be back here on Monday. And until then, later.